Let me tell you about Gary. Gary is a hypothetical student at a hypothetical school. At Gary's school, there was a petition going around saying that school could start at 8 a.m. instead of the regular 7 a.m. if it garnered enough votes. Gary was ecstatic. He knew that all of his friends, all of his classmates, all of his peers would be in favor of this new change and was confident that it would be approved. In fact, he was so confident that he told himself, because everyone around me is voting, I don't have to. And unfortunately, his peers thought the same thing. They told themselves, because everyone is voting, because Gary is voting, I don't have to vote. Unfortunately, the petition did not gain enough votes in order to be passed, and Gary's school still starts at 7 a.m. like it did before. So clearly, voting is an essential part of any kind of election. This is why in 2024, these countries, shaded in the color red, will host democratic elections. These 81 countries have populations that account for nearly 50% of the global population, or roughly 4 billion people worldwide. This is why people are calling 2024 the election year, because of the sheer number of countries who will host democratic elections. So clearly, voting is pivotal to how our society as we know it functions. After all, it is a way for us to participate in the governance of our country without necessarily needing to hold a position or a place in office. However, despite this importance, voter turnout in some countries still remains relatively low. As you can see on this slide, here are 5 countries among the lowest voter turnout countries in the world in the past few years. The lowest listed on this slide belongs to Nigeria, who, in 2023, hosted their presidential elections with only 34.75% voter turnout. Clearly, there is some factor or some accumulation of factors that are discouraging eligible voters from using their right to vote, and I wanted to find out why. Upon my research, I discovered that one of the reasons why was because that many citizens felt dissatisfied with the candidates for certain elections. As noted in a recent article by Pew Research, 63% of Americans feel dissatisfied with the candidates for the 2024 presidential elections. You've probably heard this sentiment before. Have you or have anyone you've heard ever said, I don't really resonate with any of the candidates, or maybe I don't really like any of these options? Then this applies to you. The second point that I want to point out is this idea of perceived irrelevance, or when voters feel as if their vote will not make a substantial difference on the outcome of elections. As noted in a recent article by NPR, 16% of non-voters during the American 2020 presidential elections did not vote because they felt that their vote wouldn't have made a difference. So clearly, these 2 factors, among many others, play a significant role in discouraging eligible voters from using their right to vote. However, despite this, we have to remember that voting is our responsibility and that we have to shift our mindset from focusing solely on the negatives to showcasing the positives. And the first aspect that I want to tackle is this idea of dissatisfaction. This is a quote from Romo Magnus. Romo Magnus is an Indonesian philosopher, and he says, The purpose of elections is not to vote for the best candidate, but to prevent the worst from winning. In any election and in any country, there will never be a perfect candidate. So we have to focus on doing research to see who we think is the better candidate, even though we know they're not the best. So instead of waiting for the perfect candidate to roll around, which they never will, we have to focus on doing that. The second point that I want to bring up is the idea of best and worst. Best and worst are subjective. What could be the best candidate for one person could be the worst for another. And this is why it is essential that we use our vote. Because if we leave that responsibility to other voters, then they could vote for a candidate who they think is best, even though, in our opinion, we think they are the worst. The second point on the previous slide that I want to discuss was that aspect or that idea of perceived irrelevance. I want to do so by introducing to you a theoretical country. Imagine this country has a voter population of 1 million eligible voters. During this country's recent presidential elections, only 1,000% of its population participated. Out of these 1,000 voters, 501 voted for candidate A, and the remaining 499 voted for candidate B. Now, from this example, I want to detract 2 points. The first being that in a democracy, the winner takes all. It does not matter if the elections or those who participated in the elections only accounted for 50% of a country's population, 40%, or 30%, or even in this case, 0.1%. Democracy does not care who votes and who does not vote, so we have to care for it. The second point that I want to discuss is the sheer margin by which candidate A won the presidency. As you can see here, candidate A only garnered 2 more votes than candidate B. 2 votes that played a significant role in determining candidate A's presidency. Now, I understand that this is a theoretical example, so I want to introduce to you all some instances in which this has happened in real life. This is Pedro Pires. In 2001, he was democratically elected as the president of Cape Verde. He had only won the elections by a mere 0.011%, or 12 votes. 12 votes! So he had only gotten 12 more votes than his opponent. A second example I want to introduce to you all is George W. Bush. In 2001, George W. Bush became the democratically elected president of the United States. He had won the election by an even smaller margin of 0.009%, or 537 votes. Now, I understand that the US follows the Electoral College, so that there are some complexities that come with that. But ultimately, my point remains. Your vote matters. Your vote is important to the outcome of elections. So it is not only essential that you use it, but that we use it wisely. So now, that begs the question. How can we be smart voters? I've thought of 5 strategies to use when researching any candidate for any position or any place in office. The first point that I want to discuss is supporters. Who is supporting a candidate? Who funds them? Who endorses them? With what groups or with what organizations are a candidate affiliated with? And from there, we have to research the values of these candidates. What do they believe in? What policies do they support? What promises have they made in the past? And from there, we have to try and align our values with theirs. And if we find that there's some sort of disconnect, then perhaps this candidate is not the better candidate for you. Because the reality is, whoever endorses a candidate will have a means and play a role in influencing the policies that they make and the trajectory they lead the country into. The second point that I want to discuss is marketing. We have to be aware about the marketing strategies that candidates use. This could be explicit, such as in the form of posters, like the ones you see lined across Jakarta. And they can also be implicit, such as in the way a candidate carries themselves, or the words they say and the words they don't say during debates. And from there on, we have to make sure to not fall for these marketing strategies. Because the ultimate purpose of these very calculated strategies is for us to like the candidate more. But it's only once we look past these strategies that we can truly understand who a candidate is, what their personal beliefs are, what their personal values are, and who they are as a person. From there on, the third point is abilities. And when I'm talking about abilities, I'm referring to two main points: experience and education. Let's start with experience. When I'm talking about experience, I'm not only referring to the duration of their experiences. I'm also talking about the kind of fields in which candidates have worked. Has a candidate had experience in the executive branch, the legislative branch, the judicial branch, or maybe even the private sector if that's something that's important to you as a voter? And from there on, we have to research a candidate's education. And I'm not only talking about formal education, such as where a candidate went to university or school. I'm also talking about a candidate's ability to be quote-unquote street smart. How much knowledge does a candidate have about on-the-ground issues throughout their country? How much do they know about Region A, Community B, or Area C? And in order to have this wide breadth of knowledge, candidates require an overlap between experience and education. Because candidates require experience in multiple fields, in multiple regions, and over an extended period of time. From there, we also want to research their responsibility. And when I'm talking about responsibility, I'm not really talking about their job description. I'm talking more about their ability to be accountable. Has a candidate taken credit for their past policies, their past ideas, their past actions, whether they be positive or whether they be negative? Because the truth is, we need to elect leaders who are willing to admit their faults. Because it is through this process of reflection that we as a country can grow in our governance and grow in our leadership. And before I move on, I want to stress one more point. If you're doing research on a candidate and you can't seem to find any shortcoming, any mistake, or any flaw, then that can usually mean one of two things. The first is that the candidate has not yet had enough experience to have made a mistake, and the second is that the blame has been shifted to someone else. And we all know that politics is a dirty game. The last point that I want to discuss is track record. What this means is that we're going to be using a candidate's past history to validate what they're promising to do now. We're going to be researching a candidate's past policies, their past ideas, their past actions, and see if that aligns with what they're promising to do now. And if you find that there's some sort of disconnect, or if actually they line up quite well, what does that tell you about a candidate's integrity and the value of their word? So, to sum up what we've discussed today, I talked about 3 main points. Reasons why voter turnout is so low in some regions, why we should vote nonetheless, and how we can be smart voters. And I say this all to serve one ultimate purpose: to encourage us all to vote. Let us not be like Gary, who had the chance to entice change in his community and yet chose not to use it. Because the truth is, voting will impact our future. It will impact our lives and the lives of our community, whether it be our peers, our friends, our classmates, the people we work with, or our families. So I want to leave you all today with this quote by Sharon Salzberg, a New York Times best-selling author. Voting is the expression of our commitment to ourselves, one another, this country, and this world. Voting is our responsibility. Voting is our future. Thank you.